Well, better late than never. This title carries such a pleasing, abstract-like aesthetic, but the story of Ultros is set on the Sarcophagus, a giant, floating cosmic uterus holding an ancient demon called, unsurprisingly, Ultros, which is stuck in a loop. You seemingly crash your ship and wake up without really knowing anything. The plot slowly unravels around you as you're tasked with destroying the shaman to break this cycle. However, depending on how you complete the game, there is more than one ending. But to see if this could be a title for you, tune into my thoughts on Ultros. Without a doubt, it's the art direction of this game that was the selling point for me. You're introduced to a surplus amount of areas in which they establish the setting immediately, with one of my favorites being the Rotten Orchard. Each biome has its own colors, plants, and background elements that really differentiate from one another. In addition to the plentiful amount of various zones, they're all complemented with their own theme and ambience. This game is full of natural sounds as you traverse around the sarcophagus, creating a more immersive experience. That being said, I didn't find the world building to be as captivating. The environments don't seem to flow from one area to the next, and there isn't a sense of it being one large, cohesive world, but rather just separate places set in one larger area. Now, this might be a little nitpicky of me, I admit, as it doesn't take away from the playthrough by any means, but it is something to note. You won't come across too many NPCs, but there is one that you will consistently run into, and that's the gardener, who always seems very happy to see you. You'll find through the gardener that collecting and planting seeds is actually a vital part of the game. Once planted, you'll see the growth of them, in which they'll spawn fruits to be utilized for your health. However, after returning to an area where you planted a seed after a loop, which I will get into later, you can gain access to new areas depending on the species of seed that you planted. My favorite aspect of this was just seeing the world grow around you. There's a satisfying element to it, but despite seeing these blooming plants, this is of course a Metroidvania, so there are enemies to face off against. Unfortunately, although I enjoyed the designs of these, there is not much variety here, nor are there many unique enemies to a given area. As for defeating these enemies, you're equipped with a blade that you can find near the game's opening, in which you have a surplus amount of combos at your disposal. The combat's very flowy. You can roll through enemies following up with the counterattack, and the movement is just all around smooth, which makes navigating around enemies and setting up attacks feel organic. The extractor pod, which you'll come across early on in your playthrough, further advances your movement by providing a double jump, and with this pod, you'll slowly unlock variations of it as you progress through the game. Most of these modifiers are primarily utilized for traversal, giving you access to areas that were previously not available. I did spend much of my time lost in Ultros because I was a bit confused on what paths were open to me, which is not necessarily a bad thing in a Metroidvania, but I really would have enjoyed an option of fast travel. However, this does not become available until around halfway through the game, but its take on fast travel is something I've never experienced but quite enjoyed. If you don't want to know how to do this, then skip the next 10 seconds or so, and I'm only telling you this now because I was very confused. You gain access to the wisps, which essentially follow you around, acting as a life support system in the sarcophagus, blooming new life. And upon coming across a save station with the tether, you unlock warping for that specific pod. The drawback here, however, is that you do have to manually do this to any pod you would like to warp to. Now, while in these save pods, you're able to upgrade many of your abilities, which could include movement, gardening, combat, stealth, and the list goes on. This skill tree felt more RPG-like than the now adopted Metroidvania charm system that derives from Ori and Hollow Knight. You want to be sure to collect enemy parts and fruits from plants so you're able to maximize your abilities. I personally did not find myself in dire need of upgrading to the fullest due to the lack of enemy and boss threat. If you've seen other videos on my channel, then you know I love a good boss fight, and while Ultros does a good job presenting them, they come few and without being a great challenge. This is primarily because if you're stocked up on fruits and enemy parts, you basically have unlimited health. In addition to this, the bosses do not carry a great amount of attack variety, allowing you to quickly memorize their patterns. On a more positive outlook, they do have some great soundtracks to complement them. Again, I don't think this took away from my experience, I just would have enjoyed a more challenging boss battle, but not everybody enjoys bosses as much as myself. However, there is one major aspect in Ultros that I've not yet touched on. The loop system is tied into the story, and upon slaying a shaman, in which there are 7 of them, you begin anew in the beginning area, without a weapon, without the extractor pod, without upgraded abilities, and without any inventory. The map itself and any planting you've done, however, is saved, so although there are what you would call roguelike elements, I wouldn't call this a roguelike game. The drawback I found here is that although vital to the story, it didn't really do anything for me from a gameplay perspective. I found myself going through the motions, reobtaining my blade and extractor pod, which is your double jump. It doesn't feel great to make steady progress, only for everything to be taken from you, especially as a Metroidvania. Now, this can be alleviated by finding these things, which can be used to lock in abilities over loops. But as I've already mentioned, due to the lack of thread, I actually stopped really going out of my way to explore, because I didn't feel that it was necessary for me to progress. With that being said, Ultros does a lot right. I just didn't find that the loop system added anything to the experience. But if you enjoy roguelite elements, then this may intrigue you. Regardless, the fluidity of the movement and the abstract-like atmosphere and ambience kept me intrigued throughout the duration of my playthrough. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on Ultros in the comments below, and if you think you might consider picking it up. So, until next time.